thing for the back. They can go side by side on this. This is 60-inch wide, so I'm going to do my front and my back, the top portion here. And then, so here's my back. Okay, and then I have to cut 2 of these, lower front and back, and I think I do have to flip this lower portion. For this portion, here's my center back and my grain line, so you can see how it's different. So I'm going to, again, try and line this up, and I'm going to make some marks and see if I can get a good chevron and get 2 of these cut out, and then I should have enough left over to get a little short little cap sleeve too. So this is the lower portion, so you can see how it attaches. You can see here's our center front and center back line. So it's going to sew on like this, but you can see the grain line is turned. So it's actually going to get turned like this when I cut it out. So can you see my lines? Now go look at the video on how to match stripes and plaids. I've matched my side seam to my side seam already, front to back. This is front only, so I'm going to line this up and try and get kind of close for the front, and then I'll flip it over, because here's the back. It's going to sew on the back this way, so I have to flip it for the back side, and then I'll make my lines for the back, and I will then cut it again for the back, and then I will cut out my little sleeve. I may try to get the sleeve to match up, at least in the front. We'll see how close I can get. I'm going to do my best to transfer those markings, so we'll see how close I get to getting all these things matched up. I cannot find a neck facing or a neck piece for this, which is not a big deal. I'm just going to cut my strip, make it a little smaller, and I'll show you how to do that. I just double checked that I had enough down here to get these pieces in the sleeve. I'm going to go ahead and cut out my bodices because my cutting table just doesn't hold the fabric out far enough, and I don't want to crawl on the floor if I don't have to. So I'm going to cut these 2 out and push my fabric up and then work on the next pieces. Okay, I'm getting ready to cut out my front lower part of the bodice, and I was trying to line up my lines, and I'm looking at how the grain line and the way this is meant to go. And if you see, if this were turned at a perfect 90-degree angle, it would be pretty easy to get chevrons, but it's not. It's not a 90 degree, it's not quite biased, it's somewhere in between, and that's the intention, and it's how it makes the garment hang the way it does. So you can see how, because of the angle, this is the direction for the lower piece, this is the direction for the upper piece. So I can line it up so that about every 3rd or 4th one will match up, but I can't make every one match up just because the angle just isn't right. So I can either get real fussy, or I can change the grain line, which I don't think I want to do because it totally changes the way the garment hangs, or I can just live with how it looks. And I think this will be fine. Remember to flip it over when you're cutting for your back. So here's my pattern piece. I've just flipped it over exactly where it was. I'm lining everything up so that at this little side seam, this is my side seam where they're going to come together, I'm lining this up so that that looks good when they come into each other. So spending a little bit of fiddly time here getting all of these pieces happy and on grain and figuring all of that out. And then I will, after I get all that done, then I'm going to come back and take my back piece and see how the back piece lines up, and then I'll cut it. So my final design decision was on the sleeve. Originally I was just going to cut it on the regular grain and try and match everything up, but I think it's super cute on the bias. So I'm going to cut my sleeves on the bias, and I've also cut a 2-inch strip for my neckline sort of on the bias. So everything's offset. I just think it looks cute, and it saves having to try and match things up, and it's usually a little more pleasing to the eye. All right, I already have my machine set up. I'm just doing most of this with a 4-thread overlock stitch, so pretty straightforward as sewing goes. I'm going to start by lining up that seam in the center front and center back. So I'm going to attach my bodice top to the bodice bottom, and on front and back, and sew that seam first. So that's what we're going to start with. All right, we're going to start with the bodice back. I did mark my notches for my armhole. There's also notches for side seams and for matching the lower portion to the upper portion for the bodice. All right, this is how the pieces are going together. So here's there's the neckline. You can see the shoulder. I've laid the piece, and now these are awkward looking little pieces, but this is actually side seam here, so this will fold back and make the rest of my side seam. And I'm not being super cautious here. Like I showed you over at the cutting table, they're not going to match up perfectly, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. And I'm just going to sew it. And there should be a little bit of an overlap here because there's a 5/8 inch seam allowance, so they should come together just right at the 5/8 inch. All right, so that's the same for the front and the back. Just make sure you get the correct one on, get the back on the back and the front on the front, and we're ready to sew them up. Can you see the seam? Cute. This is very lightweight. Very, very lightweight. I hope it's not too see-through, but I like it. I like it a lot. Okay, now the front. Okay, now we're going to sew these together at the shoulder seams. Make sure you get right sides together. All right, so now I have a front and a back at the shoulders, and I have two options. I can go ahead and work on my neckline, or I can set in the sleeve next. Now, I don't do a true set-in sleeve. I do what I call a flat sleeve, where I sew the cap of the sleeve, and then I start at the underarm of the sleeve, and I sew all the way down the side seam. In a knit, especially t-shirt type thing, it's the easiest, and it looks the same either way. This is a set-in type sleeve, as in it's sort of a fitted sleeve. It's not real full and wide, but it will still sew in just as nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and sew my, my neckline piece together so it's a circle, and I'm going to go ahead and set in the sleeve. So here's my neckline piece. And I cut it on the bias too, so I'm just going to do right sides together. The neckline, your little neckline casing should be at least 2 inches smaller than your neckline measurement. So this will be my little neckline binding, and we just fold it in half now, and then this will get sewn around the neck. So I can do that next, or I can go ahead and do the sleeve, and I'm going to go ahead and do the sleeve. I'll do this in a bit. So for the sleeves, I did mark my all of my little notches, so it's very easy for me to find my front and my back. Before I do anything, I'm going to go ahead and just serge the hem just to make it flat. If you are going to do a cover stitch, I had to go look it up because my brain's overloaded. That's why we're doing a comfort project. If you're going to do a cover stitch, you don't need to do this step. The cover stitch will handle it. I don't think I'm going to do a cover stitch on this one, so I'm going to go ahead and serge my hemline of the sleeve only. So it's nice and finished and stretchy. I like this little bias sleeve. Isn't that cute? Isn't that going to be cute on? Okay, now we're going to match up notches and sew it in. Right sides together. I'm going to put a few pins to hold it in place. Make sure you remove your pins when you're working at your overlock. You should remove them anyway, but especially at the overlock because you have a knife engaged. A lot of flying parts can happen and shrapnel. Sewing can be dangerous. If you're having a hard time getting this sleeve in, I have my sleeve on top, but if you put the sleeve on the bottom, your machine does more of the feeding for you and easing, and it can make it easier to have the sleeve down against the feed dogs. Next sleeve. Once you've got one in, it makes the other real easy to know if you've got it right. All right, I have two sleeves. So now I'm going to just flip this around and I'm going to sew this seam all the way down from under the arm in the sleeve, just like that. I'm going to sew this whole seam down, both sides. I like to put top on top because I just like the direction when my seam allowance shows on the inside. I like the way it looks. Now this will match up at the side seam. I'm going to open this up on the seam so you can see. All right, here's my side seam. Can you see my lines line up? It lines up perfectly. Okay, now we're going to go do the other side. Same way. Putting in a few pins. This is the one that has the seam showing up in a different spot, so I want to make sure I get everything lined up nicely. That side seam. This one, can you see its chevrons? Looks really good. It's right on target. Now I'm going to go ahead and just go around the hemline. Find my front. Okay. So I know which direction my seam should be pressed to. And we're just going to go all the way around the hemline and finish it off before I top stitch it. Again, you could use a cover stitch if you want to. arrows in this so that it was facing the right direction. Okay, I am now ready to just show you real quick. Let me hold it up. Now I haven't pressed anything yet, but I like it. It looks really cute. Okay, now we're ready to do our neckline. Now whenever I do a neckline like this, always put this seam where you sewed your little circle together either in the back, center back, or on a shoulder where it's least noticeable. And I'm going to double check that I like the size. I did measure and make it 2 inches smaller. This is bias cut knit, so it's really stretchy, so I may want to go even a little bit tighter. So I'm going to, before I stitch this in, I'm going to make sure my camera's still on, I'm going to check it. And once this is in, all that will be left is I'm going to top stitch my hems in, and you can, depending on how full or how stretchy this is, if this were a very fitted knit, I would recommend doing a cover stitch or doing a zigzag stitch or doing a double needle or doing a stretch stitch on your sewing machine. If you have, like I do, like this is nice and wide, I don't have to worry about pop stitching, you could straight stitch it, which is probably what I'm going to do. But it depends on how fitted the knit is. Okay, I'm going to find my center front and center back on this. So now I'm going to sort of quarter this. Now when you quarter a neckline, especially one like this where the front dips down lower than the back, you will not be quartering shoulder seam, center front, center back. The shoulders will not be even in your quartering. So mark your center front and your center back first, and then the quarter will probably be also sort of towards the front beyond your shoulder seam. Make sure everything's folded in half. You're going to have 3 layers you're catching, 2 layers of your neckline facing, and then your layer of your garment. Sometimes I pull it just a tiny bit tighter in the center front. Can you see this one? Sometimes they will pull forward, just to poke forward, even if you have made it kind of tight in a crew neck, especially if you're not working with a ribbing, which I'm not. I'm doing a self neckline here. I'm using a self fabric instead of a ribbed fabric. Though you certainly could do a contrast ribbing, which would be really cute if you had it. If I had pink that matched this, I would put that on there and probably put it on the sleeve, make it kind of look like a ringer tee. Oh, that'd be so cute. I do like a ringer tee. Got this pinned in, and we're just going to stitch it around. Got it half pinned in. After this, I'm going to go to the sewing machine and just top stitch in all my hems. It's got, I believe, a 5/8 inch allowance for hem all the way around. Now this fabric, I'm not going to put a tag in. Sometimes I put a tag in my garments that I make, and sometimes I don't. I'm not with this one. My tags, first of all, tags really bother me in my center back. I have some scars on my back from back surgeries, and tags are super annoying against a scar. So I don't like to have tags. I'll often put them in a side seam or somewhere else. But because this is sort of a lightweight sheer fabric, the tag is showing through. I don't like that. So we're going tagless. All right, in goes the neckline. So here's my shirt. All that's left is hemming, which I'm just going to turn around and do at the sewing machine. And then I will meet you over at the dress form, and I'll show you how it looks. I might even try it on. But first, I always do this. I press it really nicely, because no matter if you never press it again, pressing it after you've sewn it always makes it look nice, or pressing as you sew. I give all of my seams a good steaming, especially in something like this where it's cotton, and then it looks nicer when it's on the body, it looks nicer when it's on the dress form, it looks nicer on the camera. Okay, see you back here in a minute. So here's my new cute comfy top. I like the length. Let me just show you the side seams. Can you see how it matches up? And even though I cut the sleeve on the bias, it ends up matching. This sleeve matched up perfectly. I didn't even try. I should have tried a little bit on this one, because I think I could have made it match up without really trying very hard. But I like the bias cut on it. I think it's very cute that way. Super simple little top. comment below and tell me, do you comfort craft too? Thanks for coming along with this speed comfort sew with me, and I'll see you next week for another fun video.